The county nurse comes in, you'll be in trouble.
I'm scared.
I'm gonna go.
I'm scared.
You'll get a free gift and stay in the jail for a night.
You got a name for him? He's in the Cairo. I said,
I hate them. I fuck up your glasses and everything.
Even loose down here. Yeah, I have one has a hole.
Oh.
They got a lot. They had to go.
So I can breathe and I can drink.
You can drink to it.
My margarita.
Good straw.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. We'll call Marion County Board of Supervisors for Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020 into order and have roll call and public notification.
Dan Buchanan.
Yeah.
Don Horstman let us know he couldn't be here today. Bill Efford.
Yes.
Bert Skinner.
Here.
Bill Heineke.
Here.
Bob Rogers. Bob.
Here.
Oscar Scholes.
Here.
John Banks.
Here.
Terry Lee.
Here.
Carolyn Bartlett. Here. Pam Fall.
Here.
Bill Schradel.
Here.
Gary Textell.
Here.
Jim Gore.
Present.
Gary Nelson.
Here.
Berta Mogenty.
Here.
Pete Olson.
Here.
Steve Johnson.
Here.
Carol Moen.
Here.
Eric Panier.
Here.
Lou Yoki.
Here.
Russ Winzig.
Here.
Todd Gerlin.
Here.
Jerry McRoberts.
Here.
Mark Thompson.
Present.
Glenn Hansen.
Here.
Stacy Wenzel. Here. Dana Heller.
Here.
Bob Anderson.
Here.
Okay, so at this time, we've got 27 present and 2 absent. IDA and Cook County Clerk have complied with open meeting public notification laws. Meeting notices are posted on the electronic meeting notice board on the first and second floor of the Government Center and the main floor of the Justice Center. A hard copy is in the public meeting folder just in the clerk's office window, and all 5 newspapers have been notified. This meeting was originally posted on 9/14 and then reposted just with the link to the YouTube at 9/21 at 1:25.
Okay, Glenn Hanson's gonna lead us in the invocation.
Good evening, Lord. Thank you for life. Thank you for our freedoms and for the abilities you've given us to try to do our best to help our fellow man. Guide our decisions. Thank you for all of our county employees. Whatever their job, they make us proud to live in our county. Thank you for your generous gift of free will. Help us to use our free will and common sense to conquer COVID. Guide us in our decisions. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Glenn. Okay, item number 3, special matters and announcements. Okay, just a couple things. Number 1, I want to express my thanks to the over 100 photos that we've gotten in. We're updating our website. People are submitting photos, so I want to express my thanks. Also want to just inform the board and the public that we do now have our own YouTube channel. It's a view-only channel. It's actually, we're live right now, live streaming to our YouTube channel as we speak, so everything you say is going to be recorded, and as Lance would tell you, it'll be permanently there out on YouTube. So that's the 2 announcements that I have. Thanks, Louis. Okay, public comment. I believe we didn't have any. Okay, item number 5, approve the agenda. Motion by Supervisor Olson, second by Supervisor Thompson. Anybody got any problems with it? Not all those in favor of approving the agenda, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign.
That motion's carried. Number 6, approve the minutes of the August 17th, 2020 meeting. Approved by Supervisor Gore, seconded by Supervisor Roberts. Are there any issues there?
Mick Roberts.
McRoberts, excuse me.
That's okay, Louis.
Yeah. All those in favor of approving the minutes of August 17th, 2020, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? That motion's carried. Okay, item number 7, request for proposal for financing of the new highway facility. Sean Lentz from Ellers and Associates will take the podium. Oh, is there a mic there? No? Hit that red button.
Battery's dead.
You might be able to hear me anyways.
Well, a lot of times what happens, some of the audience and then the people that are on YouTube can't hear you.
It is on.
Check.
Oh, good.
Okay. Good evening, board members. Nice to see you again. We've got a brief presentation that we went over with the executive group a couple of weeks ago that we wanted to go over with the full board to discuss the approach that we are going forward with or looking for your direction to go forward with for the highway department building. So just as an update, and I would gather that many of you in your day-to-day activities are aware of this, the current market or interest rate environment or home refinancings or whatever else you might be looking at to borrow money is currently very, very attractive. And I've got a slide on the next page that shows that a little bit more graphically. So that is a positive when, as the county is, you're in a situation where you're looking at doing long-term fixed rate financing for a what I would call a legacy capital project. On top of that, and probably because of it, since the last time that you have discussed the highway department building, a number of banks in the local or regional area have contacted the county, and they've contacted me, expressing that they have a strong interest in purchasing or providing the financing for the highway department building. So on an issue this large, approximately in the range of 25 million, we'll see that sometimes, but a lot of times for banks and local institutions, it can be a little bit too big to do on their own. They'll look to combine with others, but maybe not do entirely on their own. But in the current environment, it does seem to be something that's of strong interest for them. Construction-wise and expense-wise for the county, what are the upcoming responsibilities that you have? The issue that I'm referring to here, and Jody can speak to this, is cash flow. You're gonna have large invoices coming in. You've gotta have funding in place. CBS Squared has provided to the county a memo that really what they're highlighting is, as we get into May of 2021, the expectation is that we'll have incurred about $10 million in expenses of the total expenses for the project. So things are gradually ramping up, but you can see we will be spending a significant amount of funds on this project as we get into early 2021. Now, with all that being said, the county staff and the board spent a lot of time looking at what would be the financial impact of proceeding with the highway building on the taxpayers. And with that in mind, I wanted to reiterate to you kind of the plan that we've discussed to date, which was that we wanted to target the payments that the county would have to make on the new debt to really be hitting us, so to speak, or getting onto a budget that will be responsible for it, such that we start really making payments on this in 2022. And the reason is that in 2021, this next year coming up, you really start seeing, next year is the last payment at the current total payment levels for the county's debt, and then it really starts to drop down after that. So through the planning of county staff, we've really tried to target the debt impact from this new, very large project to hit us in 2022. So with that in mind, our initial thought and plan was to be issuing the debt in 2021. And again, the idea there is that if you issue the debt in 21, it'd be 22 that you'll start making the payments. Okay. Jody, if you go to the next slide. Just real briefly, going back to that point about current market conditions, this chart is a chart of what's called the bond buyer index. So it's a common index used to track interest rates for governmental debt. This is over a 30-year period, and on the far right side of the chart is where current interest rates are per the bond buyer index. So you can see over a 30-year period, we are at a very, very low interest rate point for debt. Okay, Jody, the next one. So as we looked at the current situation, the market rate situation, and also taking into account the interest that has been expressed to the county, an option came forward that we wanted to discuss with the county board. We did discuss with the executive committee a couple weeks ago. And that was an option of going forward with a bank request for proposals, but one that really makes sure that the terms of it are going to be consistent with all of the legwork that the county board and staff have done to position the county to be able to take on this project within where you want to have the tax impact be. So some of the provisions that we're looking for in this request for proposals to be consistent with that finance plan is one, we would prefer to have the ability to draw funds down during the construction period and only pay interest on what we have drawn during the construction period. Now, the benefit of that is even with borrowing rates as low as they are, investment rates, when you get money and you put it in the bank to try to earn money, they're even lower. So if we're in a situation where we can draw money as needed, it helps minimize that interest expense that the county's accruing. At the same time, our ideal would be to fix the interest rate for a 20-year period, up to a 20-year period, because as I mentioned and you saw in that previous chart, long-term interest rates are very low. So we want to take advantage of that situation. Also, our preliminary plan was not to have any debt payments on the highway department building debt until 2022. We want to maintain that in order to be consistent with how you have expressed the plan amongst yourself and to the public. Also, if interest rates are very, very...
That's a $50 fine, Gary.
Unfortunately, that's happened to me too. So.
Turn that off.
With interest rates extremely low, the idea of doing prepayments or maybe refinancing aren't very likely, but it could happen. And so having more prepayment flexibility on the debt is always a benefit would be the benefit for the county. This option potentially could lead to elimination of the need to get a bond rating. Getting the bond rating isn't necessarily a bad thing. The county, through efforts of the board and staff, has a very, very good bond rating right now. But if that isn't necessary and we don't end up paying a higher interest rate because we don't have it, maybe we can avoid that particular expense. And lastly, this isn't something that we talk about typically a lot with board members, but we do talk about with the staff. whenever you do securities out in the commercial market, just like stocks or mutual funds, there are a lot of disclosure responsibilities throughout the life of the debt that maybe we didn't during it. Well, I'll keep going. If we're not hearing, please let me know. Those disclosure responsibilities can be difficult to deal with during life. And if we can eliminate some of those, that's not a negative for the county. Okay, Joe?
And Sean, I just wanted to point out something we talked about in executive, items number 1 and 2. It's typical a lot of times with number 1, a draw feature during a construction period, that they set a time certain at a set interest rate, and then at the end of that construction period, they then fix the interest rate for the 20 years. We don't want to have a situation where the interest rates take off on us and we lose that 20-year window to lock that in. So, I know you'll evaluate it along with our finance department and court counsel, but we got to make sure that we take advantage of these very low interest rates and lock in that 20 years. And if we draw a feature, we'll just have to evaluate.
Absolutely, yep. And just as a reminder for the group, where does the 20 years come from? The useful life of this facility should be far longer than that. But under Wisconsin law, the longest you can issue a general obligation debt of the county is 20 years. Okay, Jody, if we go to the next page. So as a first step to see if the RFP process will work, we put together a not to exceed, and your bond counsel, Quarles and Brady, along with John Mensch, your court counsel, has prepared a resolution that would start the process this evening. And so that's on the agenda. As part of that, then, we're also looking for approval from the full board to proceed with sending out the request for proposal to these institutions in the county area that have a presence in the county area that have expressed an interest in this debt. And that would be sent out probably in the next week or so as well. What we would plan to do is probably about a week before the county board meeting, maybe a little sooner than that, we would get those responses back. And as the chairman mentioned, we will review those and then make a recommendation that would be presented to the county board one way or the other at your meeting, I think on the 19th, if I'm not mistaken, is the next meeting.
October.
Yep. If we're not happy, there is no obligation for the county board to proceed. So if you don't get a proposal that is to the liking of the finance staff and to the county board, we still have the option of going the route of selling securities, which is out in the full commercial market, very similar to the process that we did with the Justice Center back in the early 2000s. So that option, and with other debt that the county has done. And that could be done as we originally planned in 2021, early in the year, or maybe even sooner if we wanted to go in that direction as well. Again, one last thing I'll mention before opening it up to the board for questions is this will start a process because of the strong interest we received. We think it's a good idea to explore this avenue and see what could come of it, particularly if it can achieve those goals that we talked about on the previous slide. But if we don't like what we see, there's no problem stopping that process and going back to what was our original intended plan of looking forward to the debt in 2021. So with that, unless Jody, or I don't see Jeff back there right now, but if there's anything you guys would add, otherwise I'd open it up for any questions.
Why do you think the banks are interested?
Yeah, I've done a little checking with some banking institutions. One item that I've heard is that with all of the federal programs right now, oftentimes money goes through the banks and then gets distributed out kind of through that mechanism, that there are a number of institutions that have far more money in their balance sheet than they typically have. And when they have that situation, even though the interest rates that are out there right now are very low,
they still are, they're better than putting it, say, into maybe a US Treasury or something like that, or a promissory note, through the US Treasury. So they're looking for better interest rates, but safe investments. And thus, I think with that situation, it's a good benefit that the county could potentially take advantage of.
When you sit there and say it's about the bond rating, how expensive is this bond rating?
A bond rating, let's see, it varies somewhat on the size of the issue. I'm guessing on a 25 million, we'd be looking at probably about a $25,000 cost to do that, in that range. And just as a reminder for the board, why do you do it? If you can get a higher or better rating, that translates into lower interest. And lower interest rates generally, and this is an analysis we look at before deciding about whether to get a rating, but generally, if you look at the county's rating right now, which is AA, versus if you didn't get a rating and you were selling your debt non-rated, it could be somewhere between 25 to 50 basis points higher interest rates if you're at that non-rated level, depending on the buyer. And that's one of the questions we're gonna receive flush out with this process. But when you can get interest rates 25 to 50 basis points lower than you would otherwise, that more than offsets that upfront cost to get the rating. That's why you would do it.
But they're feeling right now that the banks are gonna be competitive, we could save that rating cost.
Right. Yeah, I get that.
Hey, John?
Right now, we're making a debt payment on the Justice Center, and that's about to stop, right?
Yes.
Okay, what's that amount we're paying yearly versus what this will be?
Jody, did the group get the pre-sale report?
Yes.
Okay, would you be able to call that up? 1 second, I think we got a chart that will help on that particular question. Perfect, if we go back to, I think, the last exhibit on this. There we go. Okay. So right now, this chart is a chart that has the existing debt of the county and the proposed new debt based on estimated interest rates, and they're conservative interest rates. Right now, in 2020, we're paying about $3 million in principal and interest on our debt. Next year in 2021, we're a little bit below that, but in that same range. And then in 2022, in 2022, we are paying off the rest of our existing debt at that point. And if we do the new debt, we'll also start paying some payments on the new highway department bond in 2022 as well. After paying off the old debt and then just having the highway department debt outstanding, the projected payment there you can see is about, get the exact number here for you. It is, right now, it's about $1.7 million a year between 2023 and 2040 that you would be repaying equal principal and interest payments, total of 1.7 million through 2040 to totally prepay the debt or pay the debt off at that point. So that's the model that we're looking at right now. And again, this is the timing is working in the county's favor because as county staff is set up, you've got the existing debt coming offline at the same time that you as a county board are being asked to add a new major legacy type or major project. And so it does fit in very well of adding this debt without spiking the county's debt levy up, which you, because of the planning that you've done, the ability to pay off the old debt as this debt's coming on, you've positioned yourself very well.
Any further questions? If not, we'll move on to item number 8, which is Sean explained. 8 is the resolution, the initial resolution authorizing the issuance of $25,120,000 general obligation highway department building bonds. And as the resolution's in your packet, and as Jeff indicated, Quarles and Brady developed this, and it will require a 3/4 vote of our board and to go with this initial, resolution. And then, based on the responses to the RFP that, Sean will put out, the board will vote to accept or reject those proposals at our October meeting. So could I get a motion to accept that resolution for the initial, bonding? Motion by Supervisor Hanson, second by Supervisor Mosentein. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call. It takes 3/4 to pass this.
Okay, we're starting off with Don Horstman with absent. Bill Efforts,
Yes.
Bert Skinner,
Yes.
Dale Heineke,
Yes.
Bob Rogers, absent. Oscar Scope,
Yes.
Don Banks,
Yes.
Terry Lee,
Yes.
Carolyn Bartlett,
Yes.
Pam Fall,
Yes.
Bill Stradle,
Yes.
Gary Taxell,
Yes.
Jim Gord,
Yes.
Gary Nelson,
Yes.
Roberta Mosentein,
Yes.
Pete Olson,
Yes.
Steve Johnson,
Yes.
Carol Moen,
Yes.
Eric Panier,
Yes.
Uyoki,
Yes.
Russ Rinzig,
Yes.
Todd Gerlin,
Yes.
Jerry McRoberts,
Yes.
Barb Thompson,
Yes.
Van Hansen,
Yes.
Stacy Wenzel,
Yes.
Dana Heller,
Yes.
Bob Anderson,
Yes.
Dan Buchanan.
Yes.
Okay, that is 27 yes and 2 absent.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And Sean, I guess you got your marching orders.
We'll see you in October.
All right, sounds good. Thanks. Okay, item number 9, resolution clarifying the resolution of 2019 it's actually -18. I think the agenda has 28. Corrective action plan, sheriff's department, Spillman software use agreement. And before, we discuss it, I'd like a motion to say that, you just say pass it, and you can always vote no, but I'd like to get it on the floor before we discuss it. Motion by Supervisor Olson to pass that resolution, second by Supervisor Rinzig. Yeah, and I'd like to say a little bit before our sheriff's department, says anything. And the reason I'm doing this is because, the law enforcement's passed this, as has exec, but there's some new, board members and, and also kind of a general review of what went on, why we had to do that corrective action plan back in 19. The sheriff's department had purchased some Spillman software without the approval of the county board. And this led to that corrective action plan by law enforcement and exec and the full board. And that CAP corrective action plan needs to be clarified since it was not written the best, and that's partially my fault. We had the discussions with Corp Council, administration, the sheriff's department, those various committees, but some of the stuff wasn't clarified, and this clarification was requested by me, by Jody, and by Stan Buchanan, who's the chairman of the law enforcement committee. And now, what I want to explain, though, on passing this, how it relates to our item number 11, the 2021 budget. In that budget, if you looked at it in detail, the sheriff's department is requesting another position. According to the capital improvement thing, that is not allowed in 2020 or 2021, and without the clarification that we're putting in here for, as it reads in the, unless a public safety issue exists causing the need for additional staff. So, that's what I'm trying to get across here is if we don't pass this resolution, the position for the sheriff's department cannot happen in the budget. If we do pass it, you still control the budget, you still can decide whether that sheriff's department position is going to be approved. The reasons, again, some of the background information that we want this position, or some people want it for the sheriff's department, is that Jeff Wolf, who's our patrolman and our rec officer part-time now, we'd like him to become, the sheriff's department and I would like him to become full-time. His position would be paid 75 or 80% by the DNR. We have a lot more activity on our trails, on our lakes. There's a lot more funding out there. The trails, the snowmobiles, the lake is become tourism and economic development. The state and the DNR are helping with it. There's just a lot of issues. We've got our Northern Advisory Trail that is developing connectivity throughout the county with other counties so that everything can be linked up. It's just now's the time, kind of like our bonding thing, now's the time that we need some help on our trail. And Jeff Wolf is doing an excellent job. He's part of the Northern Advisory Trails. That's NORTAC, is an acronym. Dan Toll is our citizen representative. He's the president of that. I'm on it. Jeff Wolf is on it. And Dan Toll has also now been elected to the ORV Council. It's Outdoor Recreational Vehicle Council, where the state has millions of dollars that they allocate to the trails. And Dan is doing an excellent job. In fact, he's in Wausau right now, trying to get some money for our area. So if Jeff goes 100% rec officer, that leaves a patrolman short. We make a decision, we stay with 3 patrolmen and a 100% rec officer, or we get a new patrolman. That's the background of what's going on. And now I'd like our sheriff's department to give us further detail.
Thank you. I'm just gonna say a couple of things. I'm gonna turn it over to Jason Liu, who's gonna tell you about our current schedule. It kind of blends into number 11. We're not trying to blend the two issues. But the changes of the corrective action plan, I didn't have any say in writing that proposal. Jody and Jeff handled that. I didn't have any input. I didn't want any input. Those aren't my ideas. This is the intent of the corrective action plan is not changed one bit, or the seriousness of it does not change one bit with these changes. They're just clarifications. Again, the intent does not change. But getting this patrolman is a public safety issue. That's why I brought it forward. That's why it's supported by finance and Mr. French. I don't bring things to you that aren't supported by everyone. And these are clarification issues that help Penny, our secretary, help Jody, that Chairman Buchanan requested, and that Jeff requested. And they're just clarification issues. So that's what I would like to say about the corrective action plan. Again, the intent does not change on that. So I hope that you pass that so we can move forward with making our county safer. Obviously, 2020 has brought some changes that none of us have ever expected with COVID-19. What that did, the increase that we saw, was ATV, recreational boat, and what we believe will be snowmobile if and when we get snow. Hopefully we don't, but Jeff Wolf is the only one that wants snow. But that will increase also. What you'll hear them guys talking about is how many pontoon rentals at Lake Country Marina in Chetek increased over 400 pontoon rentals this year versus last year, which created several boating accidents on Chetek Chain. We had a very serious ATV crash. We're looking to expand some things education-wise, safety-wise. This is 100% a safety position. We have thousands of recreational vehicles going through the village of Turtle Lake every day, almost every day, a weekend, I should say, not every day. And Jeff will tell you a little bit about that. By voting in this position, you are strictly increasing the safety of this community and its citizens. And Jeff and Jason will come up now and explain some of that. And then we'll end our presentation, and we're just going to tell you a little bit about it.
And just to make clear, I know it gets confusing here, we're mixing things. We're mixing number 9 and we're mixing it with the budget. But I felt it was important that we talk about the budget so you know the ramifications of this resolution on number 9.
I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the staffing and how we utilize Jeff now, and then he'll kind of talk about the details of what he does. Back when this position started, we only had 25 miles of UTV or ATV trails. We currently have 93 miles UTV trails and 350 miles of snowmobile. Village of Cameron, the city of Rice Lake is in the process. Turtle Lake, Chetek, and Barron are all opening their streets. So we've increased so much in traffic in UTVs and the safety. And the boat traffic, as the sheriff said, has got extremely busy. Currently, we run 4 people on day shift. When we maintain 4, we allow Jeff to go out and do other things. But with the staff, with vacation, holidays, sick time, a lot of the time we're at 3, so when we're at 3, he can't go out and patrol those things. So a lot of times, it's just bringing him in on overtime to work the weekends, on the busy holidays and other things. Also, one of the things Jeff does is manage all the grants in the county for the trails, and we're the only sheriff's department in the state that takes care of those duties. So we're basically, and we're looking at a couple other reasons we can maximize some funding to increase the revenue. In the last 2 years since Jeff's been in the position, we've increased our revenue quite a bit. And as Louis said, we feel we can get up where 75 to 80% of his wages paid, and we're hoping for more. But the more we can utilize him and other members, him not in the schedule, if we have that 4th guy during the week, they can go out with him, their wages will be reimbursed too, so.
Is Jeff gonna bring up about the UTV and DNR deal, or are you?
Yeah, Jeff will talk about it. So I'm gonna let Jeff kind of tell you what he does, but that's kind of why we're asking for him full time. It's just hard for us at our current staffing level to get them out and maximize the dollars we can receive.
I've been assisting in the rec program now for 5 years on the water side, and now I took over for Dave Boyd at the end of 2018. With COVID really locking down a lot of the community, we've seen the exact opposite on our trails and lakes. I've spoken with a number of dealerships in the area who had record sales this year to the point where they can't even get inventory to sell, which has created a pretty serious problem on our trails. Not only has the traffic increased, but our new users to those sports have increased, and there's really a lack of education, which has caused a number of accidents and other issues. Some of it gets to the point where it's careless operators, which requires a lot more law enforcement. The other end of it is educating these new user groups and tourists that come to our areas. The laws that govern ATVs and UTVs are different than what many of you know for operating a motor vehicle on the highways. And we have just as much of an obligation to keep our tourists and our local residents safe on these trails and lakes as we do on our county highways. The issue that we have at the sheriff's department is we have typically 4 squads that cover the 900 square miles. And for the last, since 2007, we've had essentially a half-time deputy that's patrolled all of our lakes and our trails. And with this, Jason has been very flexible with my schedule, but it gets to the point where there's only so many hours in a day. I don't work 7 days a week. So trying to manage all of the patrol calls and assisting with the patrol and manage the trails and enforce the laws on the trails and the lakes is, we've reached the capacity of the sheriff's department, and without making some changes at the county level, things could potentially get out of control. We've seen it in other areas of the state. We talked pretty significantly in the ORV council meeting that was actually today, about education and enforcement to keep things under control. Otherwise, we'll get to the point where tourism will actually start to retract. People find it less appealing to come here if we can't keep things in order on our trails and our lakes. So it's very important for both our safety and tourism side of things that we're out and we're present. People expect to see us on the trails to keep everything in order. We actually, Dan helped us out today. We got about $170,000 in new grants for the trails. So we'll be getting work on that here shortly.
Okay, right now, I guess you heard from them, but is there any questions relative to the motion that we have for number 9, a resolution clarifying the corrective action? Jim?
Well, I'm a little bit confused there. Now, this funding there that you're sitting there talking about this, is this one of your assistants that's a part half-time that's or is it just you?
Just him.
So right now my position is essentially split among 3 different areas. One is managing the grants and all of our ATV clubs, giving out our maintenance dollars to them. A third of it would be regular road patrol, going to car accidents, domestics, and things like that. And then the third part of it will be ATV, snowmobile, and our water patrol.
But now you want to change it over to all of that, all ATV and voting and all that stuff?
So yeah, the request would be to pull me out of the patrol division, so I would just deal with the trails and the recreational patrol. like Jason said, the prime times that we need to be out on our lakes and our trails are on the weekends. Well, during the summer, our busy months, that's typically the most appealing time for people to take vacations. The only way we're able to accomplish that is either to not patrol our trails and our lakes and keep me on the road, or to fill it with overtime to move me out there.
Okay, so then what you're after then here is then to get somebody to fill that spot that you're taking him off.
The patrol function will be filled, that is correct.
And then Jim, that's part of the budget, that's not part of the resolution, but that's part of the budget, but I wanted to talk about them in tandem. Well, the budget process will be the one where we're actually decline or
Right,
approve.
oh, I got you, all right,
And the oversight of the club is, I think, an important piece, and I know that's a part that why Jody supports this, is that all that money that we get from these grants runs through the county. That needs some more oversight because the money is increasing. When you increase funds, you need more oversight. Jeff can do that right now. We're pulling him in every direction. We've maxed out Jeff Wolf. I need some help with that. You did that for us 3 years ago when our jailers were maxed out. You gave us those 4 positions. We got rid of our part-timers. You and Jeff Wrench, we talk about it all the time, how that plan worked. We were maxing out our jailers. They're no longer maxed out. They're happy. It changed the direction of our jail by adding those full-time positions and getting new part-timers. We had maxed everybody out. We're maxing Jeff out. We've created new partnerships with the highway department. Mark is helping on a lot of these grants and a lot of the engineering part of it. That is a new position. I know he said at executive that he supports this because of the relationship efforts that we working together to maximize. We had some conversations out there about when we put new dirt down on trails, we're going to blacktop portions of it because we ultimately come back and do that. That's things that his department is helping us with. That's what Jeff needs to do on a full-time basis to make these grants. I mean, there was a grant given to a county just north of us. They got $900,000 for a new campsite for ATVers. Now that's something that Jeff can go after. That takes a lot of time and effort on both his part and Mark Survey's part. Those are things we can go after today. I sat in that meeting with Jeff because it's always in Wausau. Today it was online. We got to sit in it. A lot of money was thrown around, and ours was 5 minutes. Jeff's presentation was 5 minutes because he had everything in detail. He had worked ahead with Lori and Mark and had a lot of plans, blacktopping amounts, the dirt amounts. When you put a pile of dirt on the ground, Jeff Wolf and I aren't trained to say, yeah, that's 7 yards of dirt and it's 2.5 inches. We call Mark Survey. He walks out and he doesn't even have to measure it. He knows. That's the kind of relationship that we're creating. It just takes time and effort. And I need you to give us that time.
As you know, the highway department does not want ATVs on the county roads. They're not made for the roads. So Mark's kind of self-serving here. He's getting the ATVs.
No. But that's a connectivity issue, and we want to get them off the roads, even the county or the township roads. But land use agreements Jeff and I are meeting with a company on Monday for a land use agreement because it takes time for him to get out of patrol, go meet with a company or a landowner to get us off of the road so we don't have to go down a road, even a township road. We're trying to get off of these township roads. It's just impossible because we have a lot of farmland that's usable. So we're using that, but a lot of counties have a lot of trails and we're increasing them. Sorry.
Bill?
Okay, what it's probably more of a question for you or Jeff or Jody here. And I understand the safety issue is a big deal. But the economic activity will come to our county because the increase, not only people recreating in our county, but people coming in from other counties may offset the extra tax levy that we have to propose here to fund your extra position this year.
And I agree with you 100%. There's no question. And that's an unknown number that I don't think any of us will project because it's a huge number, though. I would agree. You see a lot of out-of-town people coming here, staying here, using our trails. And it becomes an enforcement issue. It becomes a time issue. I was going to say one other thing, but we signed the new partnership with the UTV, and Jeff drove that UTV here tonight. We signed a partnership which saved us about $30,000 we had budgeted for next year. The DNR offered us a free UTV if they could use it. We keep it here. It says Barron County Sheriff's Department, Wisconsin DNR on it. They have access to it. We traded our old unit in. They're paying for the lease for the next 2 years. That's free for us. We're taking that off of our SISOP next year. we're gonna save the county every $30,000 because of a new partnership with the DNR. First time that's ever been done.
First one to say.
That's ever been done where the DNR actually paid it. They've let people lease. We're actually getting that for free.
That's great.
Mentioned the DNR. What's their role in this? Are they, because of the increase, and I'm totally in support of what you're saying, but is the DNR, are they adding extra staff? I mean, with all what you're saying, what's their role becoming this? I mean, I hope that they're not putting a bigger burden on the county and not increasing their people as well.
So, kind of twofold, and I can't totally speak for the DNR. My understanding is they were planning on leaving one of the Marion County stations vacant for a period of time. They filled that in July 1st, so now we are back to 2 wardens. But as far as the reimbursement, that's a program that was developed years ago to assist their staff in these recreational patrols. There's a pot of money set aside, and at the end of the day, the sheriff's departments are only people eligible for snowmobile and ATV. Individual municipalities are available to access the voting funds. But essentially, we submit our claims. Say our hypothetical claim for ATV would be $30,000. That gets added to the list at the end of the day. They prorate based off the funds available. Typically, it's pretty high, 85, 95%. On the ATV side, boat is consistently 75, and then snowmobile varies depending on how much snow the southern part of our state receives.
You know, and I know it's confusing here, you know, this is more a discussion that should be had on item number 11 as part of the budget. But I wanted you to hear when you're talking about this resolution on clarifying the corrective action plan. I wanted you to have all the information. That's why we're talking about all that we are.
And we wanted to show that it's a public safety issue and not just an issue where we wanted something.
Bob?
With the COVID situation, have you had any help, Jeff, from any of the other officers?
Yeah, so we're gonna have a very healthy ATV claim this coming year. When the court stopped, Jason let me utilize our court security officer. So just in the month of May, I think we billed out around 200 hours of labor just to the ATV program in 1 month. I think 2 years ago, our entire ATV claim was like around 300 hours for the year. So we're seeing significant.
And when it came to the courts, since with COVID and everything, there isn't that much going on in the courts. Weren't they pulling somebody up from a jailer then, if something was happening in the court system?
I don't know what's currently being done with that. Jason would have to talk to that. I'm not sure who's doing court security.
Sure.
Currently, our program person in the jail is handling most of the court security. Still for trials or people that are in custody that are going down, they request an officer up for that. So it's given him more time and he's helping go back down the parts of the department as well.
Okay.
Court security.
We're going back to programming also. We're gonna lose her part-time. We're actually going to a lot of virtual programming. Side note.
So as of, for instance, though, Jeff, when we had all the blowdown on the trails and everything, did you have other officers helping you during that time, even when there was that much work going on?
For 2 days, I was giving some Kurt Bronick. So for 2 days we did that, and then Kurt and I went back to our patrol functions. We were able to bill that DNR grant that the county received to reimburse the county for Kurt's time and my time.
And he was the court security. Isn't that individual, when he first started, wasn't he a patrolman? So
Well, Kurt was a patrol sergeant.
no, not Kurt. This
Jacob is
Officer
a patrolman.
Yeah, he's a patrolman.
Okay.
And the other thing we're doing is we're providing UTV safety and voter safety in all the schools through this program as well.
Yeah, our school liaison for Clear Lake, Prairie Farm and New Auburn is teaching that to, I think, 7th graders. But you're required to have it for your lifetime, so it's a good time to educate those kids.
And you're getting reimbursed for that, I think, too.
Correct.
Yeah, and we're trying to expand that, but obviously we don't have a lot of time. And again, that's another thing we're gonna put on his plate when we expand this program with more education.
John?
Well, number 9 is we're clarifying the resolution, right?
Right.
Is that item 4 on the resolution of, unless a public safety issue exists?
Yes,
And they're explaining the public safety
Correct.
issue?
yes.
Okay, so what we're doing is approving the resolution.
You're
right?
approving it, number 9 is approving this resolution only, not a position.
Okay, that's somewhere else now.
That'll be in the budget, item number 11.
Okay,
Sorry to confuse you, but we wanted you to understand it all, and Louis and I had this discussion with Jeff, so.
Are you working with any of the clubs for them to patrol the trails at all? Because I know a lot of other counties have had.
Like a trail ambassador.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't developed that program yet. It's something that at some point we could look at, but essentially, I don't have the time to do any more than what I'm already doing right now. But
Well, I mean, you're saying you need more time to be patrolling. Couldn't you take that time to do some training for other people to do the patrolling? I mean, that happens in a lot of other counties, that they have other people patrolling besides the sheriff's department. And all you need is somebody out there watching, and all they need to do is take a license number and it stops people.
We have to follow up and do the enforcement effort.
Well, you're doing it anyway if you're out there. So you're thinking it's a lot cost effective having somebody doing it on a voluntary basis out there than paying
They won't
somebody.
listen.
that theory works to a certain degree. And I worked with WADA, who is essentially the creator of the Trail Ambassador program that you're talking about. What I see frequently though, with basically any ATV that's older than a couple of years, is the thing's straight advanced 3 times before registration's renewed. So even, I get ATV complaints almost daily, and I'll run the registration number, and it's an accurate registration number, and I contact the owner, and I sold it to so-and-so 2 years ago, I call that person, I sold it to so-and-so in a boat lane a year ago, and I don't remember who that was. So we can spend a lot of time running into dead ends too, so that's the other
You're
part.
running into that situation no matter what.
Well, if I'm out there, I don't, because I know who's driving it, because I stopped them.
Well, so somebody.
They don't have to ID, they don't have to give.
They have no ability to force someone to identify them, so.
Okay, I think we've had enough discussion on this right now. Unless there's some really pressing question, I'd like to, Todd?
I have one question. Did I hear you say earlier that we're the only county that manages our grants?
The sheriff's department, yeah, we're the only county in the state that the sheriff's department manages grants.
Can you tell me why that is out of 7?
Jeff can answer it.
It was when the forestry guy retired back like 15 years ago. His secretary came over, now she helps. They eliminated a position.
Correct. It used to be that Jack Nedlin did everything, Todd, and there was discussions, Mr. Stradel showed, remember this, he was on the property committee, the old forestry committee. They considered on several occasions giving Jack Nedlin the ability to carry a sidearm and arrest people, and he didn't want it. And the compromise was to give it to a patrol deputy and let them manage the grant. So this was the way to bring 2 different situations together. It's worked well since we did it. It's worked much better to have it under Mr. Moyner, Mr. Wolf, than the way it used to be. I can tell you that.
My question is, why are we the only county that does it then?
Because we're better than some.
We're good
It's
at it,
just-
I mean, it works good.
It just works good that way.
But to maximize the dollars, we need some more time to do it, and that's all it is. It's strictly a time thing and an increase in workload over the summer.
Bill?
Well, I was just gonna say, Jack really didn't want anything to do with that because he felt that he'd leave enforcement of people that carry pistols on a regular basis like this guy's here. So that was pretty well the end of the discussion right there.
Okay, I think we've had enough discussion on resolution number 9, clarifying that, unless somebody's got a grave question about that. I'd like to call the question on this. We've got a motion and a second to pass resolution number 9, which is clarifying the corrective action plan.
Does that need a roll call through or?
No,
Oh,
I'll do it by voice vote and let it, unless we think.
okay.
Okay, all those in favor of approving this corrective action plan clarification indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by saying nay.
Nay.
Okay, could I have a show of hands with a nay? Okay, it's three nays, so the motion carries. It could be a Todd and Bob and Carol. Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 10, resolution to amend the supervisory district to include the city of Cumberland Airport with the city Ward 1. That's Cumberland set up a TIF district and they stole some of Don Horstman's district. And so it's just all it's doing is getting it, so Don's district lines up with, our land services office and gets the right description. So can I get a resolution to amend that district? Motion by Supervisor Skinner, seconded by Supervisor, Heine. Okay, is there any,
Just one clarification, we do have probably another 80 acres to add to that, to the airport site, so we'll be doing that in the near future. Did the math today and around the airport, and that goes back to 1980, when I'm looking at that. As of the last year and a half, we have an additional 80 acres that we'll probably be looking at annexation.
and I think we did it about a year or two ago also before that. Okay, all those in favor of that motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by the same sign, that motion's carried. Item number 11, 2021 budget, first draft, all yours, Jeff and Jody. Yeah.
We got one screen.
Yep.
We've tried everything.
I can do it.
I don't know.
Shady deal, it was a shady.
We'll remember you.
Says it's coming on, Jody. Jody, I'd like to start with the excess fund balance and talk about how we've discussed what we're laying plans for 2023. So we'll give this a chance. Can you project, will it eventually come on?
It'll just automatically.
Okay.
Yep.
Just be patient, folks. We'll do our best to have it up here on the main screen. Okay. Well, to the board, I'm gonna start where Jody and I spent a lot of time, and Jody, please jump in where you'd like to. I'd like to explain to the board, to the public that are here tonight, I see this budget as a springboard budget, as a budget that's working for 2021, 22, and 23. And I'm starting with some big numbers because they're very important to how several departments are gonna operate if you approve this budget. Having said that, I also, as I told the executive committee, this is one of the budget years where it's pretty rock solid. Let's leave it alone because there's been a lot of planning into this. The first number of $1.1 million recommended to set aside for ST surface transportation projects is important to our highway department. This is a dollar drawdown, or what we call a dollar match. We want to put aside money up front so that if Mr. Serby can go out and apply for projects through the DOT, Wisconsin DOT, or federal government, that he can go to them and say, I already have part of this funding. So in a very plain sense, what 1.1 million turns into is to 2.2 million. Because if we have the money, they'll fund the other part of this at a minimum of 50%, and sometimes they'll fund 80%. So this number is important for rebuilding bridges, culverts, roads. Very important.
Mark's got those applications in already, yeah.
That's my understanding from Mark. One of the places probably gonna spend this money is on the bridge on Double S immediately south of Chetek. So very important roadway in for a very high volume tourist area. Okay, very important number. The 205,000 to apply towards our 2021 budget, as you know, we always take a little bit of fund balance just to keep our mill rate levy level, and we're actually dropping the mill rate. We'll talk about that in a minute. The 350,000, we've been talking about the new highway facility. This number is to help with the study and to cover the construction manager costs that are, if you approve, will be part of that. This is just some good forward thinking. The $575,000, I am really invested in this This is money that I'm recommending that we put in our self-funded health insurance. As you know, this year we went to our own self-funded health insurance, and to date, we are doing fairly well. At the October 19th meeting, the next meeting, we're gonna have two presentations. One on HealthJoy, which is an app that our employees can use to manage healthcare and to pick a service provider. The second thing is for Alex Beaudry to be here and tell you how we're doing. I'm optimistic. I know Rachel says I'm a little bit over optimistic, but I believe that people will exercise judgment and we will do well in our self-funded health insurance. This is just a mechanism to make sure we always have enough fund balance there to cover any shock losses, even though we do have stop loss insurance. It's well run and we're doing well. Again, planning for the future. There was quite a discussion with Jody and I and Mike, Judy, and the sheriff on this next number. This is the $100,000. This money I'm recommending setting aside for a time certain to help with the possibility if the county would have to purchase any PPP equipment for a hospital or a nursing home. That number is not just something that's pulled out of the air. It's 50% of the $216,000 that we spent out of road to recovery money. My thinking is very simple. Let's have an amount that's about 50% of what we would need if we would have a big flu or COVID outbreak between now and May 1st, so that Mike Judy could help the nursing homes or our healthcare system. So that there's some thought into that. This other one is some thought into this. If you know our state budget, you know that we have a $725 million structural deficit in the next 2-year biennium budget. That's not a Republican thing, that's not a Democrat thing. That's a factual thing. That's right from our own Office of Management and Budget at the state. I'm recommending we set aside some money in case that happens. If you've been on this board more than a couple of years, you know the department that they're gonna hit hardest. It's Health and Human Services. That's the one that they're gonna take it out of. They're gonna hit us there the hardest. So these numbers, and I'm just explaining this very slowly to the board members so you understand, there's some foresight that went into this, what we're trying to plan for and contingent for, not just in 2021, but 2022 and 2023. Jody, does that? Gary?
100,000, how are you gonna help the nursing homes with that? That's not even close to what they would need.
I would expect them to come and be a partner with us. We've spent $216,000. That's really essentially, we could have spent other places. It's not just chump change. We're doing well on PP. I mean, if we had a terrible outbreak, I agree. It's not gonna be enough, but it's a start. Jody, any comments?
The only thing that I would just like to comment is this is using excess fund balance that we have with the 2019 budget. At the end of the year, our excess fund balance came back at 43.7%. And per our county board rules and procedures, we're supposed to maintain fund balance between 25 and 33%. So every year with the budget, what we do is we look at if we do have any excess fund balance, and then we earmark it for different things, that we expect are coming down the pike. And so that's where these dollars are coming from. This is money we would like to earmark for these specific things.
Let's go back to the graphs. As you know, we start with our budget presentation looking at these graphs. So when you look at the proposed 2021 budget, when you look at the big four in Barron County, we know the big four are sheriff, health and human services, highway, and waste energy and recycling. So if you take these these are the four largest departments. These four departments comprise 67.9% of all the expenditures of the county. Not unusual, pretty standard of what we do. The graph gives a very good illustration of what we do. Sean talked about our debt service. Our debt service is substantial, but it's been lowering through the years as we paid off the Justice Center. And as this board and the board before this, we're in a very very advantageous place with rates and a bond rating to look at that. So I just mentioned that. If we go down at the levy, I always like to talk about this because it's a very important part of what makes Berrien County work. 4.9 million, almost $5 million of sales tax to reduce the levy. So this is now, sales tax is 22.25%. So it's stated another way, our tax levy without sales tax would be 22% higher. So I've told this board at least the last 3 years, every year, it's amazing how our sales tax becomes more and more important to what balances our budget. Because I can remember back 20 years ago, it was half of this, or even less.
Is COVID affecting it?
Yeah, actually it is. It's actually, our sales tax is holding really steady and doing fairly well.
This is,
I'm
we're at
surprised.
an all-time high,
I'm
despite
surprised.
COVID.
I'm surprised.
I'm not, Jim. I meet with 12 other county administrators weekly, and all of the counties north of us, they're seeing their sales tax increase, new homes increase, and no tax deeds sales at all. People are buying tax deed properties sight unseen. They're buying homes sight unseen.
Well, that I know.
Yeah, I mean, so it doesn't surprise me that our sales tax is holding this well. Just the number of people that are vacationing and staying here it's just phenomenal.
Well, one of the things there, when you're sitting there talking about homes and stuff like that, there, one thing that has probably been through the COVID thing that has probably moved things along there a little bit is that a lot of people are working at home and they found out that a lot of these offices found out that it's good for these people to work at home. And being that they're working at home, they're not gonna live in a big city anymore. They're moving out into the country and they can just, and for once every 2 weeks or whatever, they gotta go in there, they'll just drive in that far and be done, and they'd rather be out into the countryside.
One of the administrators that's in a much more touristy area north of us, he said that for every house that they have in excess of 300 or 350,000, the average days on the market's 3.5 before it's sold. For the very reason that you're mentioning, Jim, the people are leaving and they're working remotely and going in once or twice a week, and they're loving it and they're staying there. So, yeah, and that's what's driving our sales tax. I really think it is. They're not going back as they did in the past.
Well, and what do you call it? One of the things is that these homes have to have the internet and stuff like that there. I mean, when I was doing real estate there 5 years ago or whatever it was, I seen people walk away from $400,000 homes because there was an internet service available, and it's really getting pretty expanded better and better now.
Yep. Let's go on to the budget tax summary tax allocation, Jody. So we'll go through this. This is a very important document. I'd like to go through this one. You can see first thing we're looking at our expenditures. These are expenditures that pertain to the property tax levy directly. This numbers are debt service. We've seen that before. And then these are offsets. So what offsets the levy to bring us down to a net levy? Well, we have 6.5 million of general revenue, 3.7 million of sales tax. That's up 100,000. Also, our fund balance for the sales tax, we take 50% of fund balance and use it in the first year and 50% in the following year to level off our mill rate. So you can see sales tax has been increasing. We've been applying more on both sides, and this is in conjunction with our policy to do that. So what we're looking at is $11.8 million of offsets to the levy, giving us down to a net levy of $21,929,444. And then we have the county library and the out of library levy payments, which are exempt from the levy limits. So we'd be looking at a 1.1% increase in our levy. This would include the new positions for recycling and for the patrol that Chairman Oki was talking about. This would be a 0.81% increase without. So you can see, and it's in your packet. So if you'll just slide down, Jody, a little bit. So we're still under our levy limits. But I want to talk about something that's very important to me, and it should be very important to a board member. We only get net new construction. But look at how equalized valuation has increased. Equalized valuation has increased 4.6% over last year and 9.4% in 2 years. So up 4.6, the levy's up 1.11. So net new construction versus what people are paying for existing is negative by 3.49%. That's a very interesting calculation, because if you look over the last even 5 years, if the levy had kept up with equalized valuation, it would be substantially higher. I'm not saying to raise the levy, but what you're seeing is something that I've read about is people are bidding up the prices of existing homes, which is driving up equalized valuation versus building a new one.
And the price of 2x4s is.
Yep, this is a very dynamic situation that on some levels, and I would agree with this. It somewhat puts Wisconsin very similar to California, where you have a Proposition 13, where you don't pay anything in property tax increase until you sell that house. This is a very interesting thing to be aware of. So, bottom line, the board will choose whichever one they want to. Either one of these would reduce our mill rate by 4.8%.
Jeff, Pete's got a question.
Oh, sorry, Pete, yes, go ahead.
Joey, can you scroll up towards the top of this chart? Right here where we can see the sales tax lines with rows 20 and 21, totals 4.7 million. Now, can you go up to the last of those graphs that you had on there?
Sure, we can go back to the graphs. So I think you want to go back to our graphs page. Yep.
Right here, less sales tax fund, 4.9 million. So there's $200,000 more here than there is in that.
Yes, that is the 205,000 right here that we are adding in excess fund balance that we would be applying to the budget.
Did we answer your question?
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Jerry?
Say just one, I know this is late in the game, okay, but this excess fund balance, the museum is having a horrible year, you know, money-wise, because there just hasn't been, they haven't been able to have any activities, and so, but I was wondering if it would be possible to take, you know, $3,000-4,000 out of the excess fund and give it to the museum. It's been years since they've been on 38,000. It hasn't been moved for quite a while.
We'll have to talk about it at executive. We'll make a mental note of that, and we can talk about it at executive, because we have two other small adjustments, one in Health and Human Services and one in
Uncollectible taxes.
uncollectible taxes we have to talk about, and that's less than 100,000.
It's 111,000.
So we can bring, now's not, I appreciate that, we'll talk about it, but now would not be the time. That'll be part of putting in the published budget.
Right, yeah. I just wanted to be sure I mentioned that to you tonight, and so. We have a meeting tomorrow, and I won't give them any encouragement, but I'll tell them we're talking about it.
Appreciate that, because Tim hasn't asked me for any more, because he kind of said he would not ask for a couple of years, but that's fine. I did want to mention, because the Solid Waste Board did increase our per recycling surcharge, $2. That's correct, $2, correct? That was not that, it was named like that meeting. $2, and I believe that's structurally to help with going with manned sites.
Correct.
Okay, fine. So that's the summary. This is another important one. So questions from the board members for Jody or I? Jerry.
Just one more question about, answer about Tim. He resigned.
Oh.
He didn't run on this election now, so, anyway, so I don't know what his reasoning was, but I think his children are young, and I think he's got a lot going in the, you know.
I would like to go through the personnel. Jody, do you have anything that I missed, anything we talked about? I do want the board to be aware it's not just the request from the sheriff for positions. You know how we do this. We talk about positions. I also want to talk about Ray has a request in. He was going to be here tonight, just couldn't make it. He has requests for 2 full-time positions to go to these manned sites where we're trying to establish manned sites for certain times to cut down on our contamination. So when you look at what the sheriff is requesting, we're also looking at that offset from the DNR for some of that funding. So I just want the board to be aware, it's not just the sheriff's department, but when you look at the recycling and waste to energy, those are recouped through grant dollars, as would the sheriff's position be, or through public charges for services, either through the recycling or for what we charge per ton for the waste energy plant. Which, by the way, the waste energy plant is doing very well. I think we had 1.5 million in cash in the bank. Gary.
I would like to see the sheriff department request as a standalone motion to pass.
Okay.
Not be with the other staffing.
Okay. I made a note of that.
Those grants are renewable each year.
Yep. And then we want to, for the museum. Yep, I've got that. Gary and Jerry, I have the museum, so I'll make notes of those separate for presentation at the executive committee.
Yeah, thank you much for that.
Yep, that's fine. Good comments all. Let's go into then what we put in our contingency fund and why we do that and what methodology behind that. So as you know, each year we do put money away for contingencies. Things happen. This would be purely for a contingency. We can do this. Any money that's left over in the contingency fund is folded into the general fund unassigned fund balance, and that's where we use it yearly to apply to the levy or other areas. We do set aside money each year because each year we have employees retire. They have accrued vacation and sick leave. They get paid out for those. We don't penalize or charge the departments for that, but then they are reimbursed from that from the contingency fund. We're looking at a 1.5%. It's 1.5% pay raise. I will tell you that CPI for the year is 1.8%. So I do believe, and I have the information from a number of the cities and counties, everybody is in the 1.5 to 2.5% pay raise. I think 1.5 is a good solid number. Executive will make a recommendation. This board will make the final decision. And then we have health insurance changes. What this is, and specifically is, we have people that maybe go from single to family or family to single or things like that. We set money aside for that. We don't penalize or charge the department. We don't penalize the departments for that. And then the district attorney has specifically asked for some money set aside. He knows he has at least one need in advance for expert witness. And I really want to say, I appreciate Mr. Wright doing this. He did not want to put it in his budget and look like he inflated his budget. He just wanted to have it in the contingency fund if he needs it to spend it. So with that, the other thing that we want to talk about, this would be Jody would explain major changes. This is a request from the executive committee to actually go through and talk about what are major changes between the 2 years. And so Jody, I'll let you handle that.
Sure. Okay, so our 2020 levy was 21,955,284. Expenditures this year, we actually had a decrease in expenditures in the general fund and the special revenue funds. That's basically due Health and Human Services. If you remember in the 2020 budget, that was just a really tough budget. Health and Human Services had a lot of placements and things like that, so they really had to increase their budget. But they've been able to make more efficiencies, placements have dropped, and so they actually were able to cut their levy by about $400,000. And so we're seeing a decrease in expenditures, general funds, special revenue funds by about $214,000. Our debt levy decreased $148,000 from last year. We did have an increase in expenditures just in highway contingency and SISOP of about $38,000. And then our library levy, just due to the circulation, the circulation rates and the number of pieces of materials that are circulated, we were able to, the library requests were about $79,000 less than last year. Looking at revenues, we did have a decrease in general fund revenues by about $186,000. Most of that is in investment interest or interest in securities. With COVID, the interest rates in the LGIP have just tanked. So we're looking at, a couple $100,000 loss that we're going to be able to budget for that for 2021. Excess sales tax revenue increased $88,400. Jail assessment and out-of-county prisoner revenue, that decreased by about 39,000 from last year. And then excess fund balance applied, last year we actually applied 650,000 of excess fund balance to the budget, because last year was just a tough budget year and we aren't needing that this year because of Health and Human Services and, just other numbers that came back that were favorable. So we were able to cut that by 445,000. So you can see that the levy increase is only 178,798. Any questions?
Last thing I would show is just CPI, because since the passage of Act 10, it has been the policy of the board that you match pay raises to CPI over, and Jody always does this, and she can talk about this, but I believe I was right at 1.8%, and the average is 2.05. So I would just ask the board to be consistent and be what you've done ever since Act 10 has went into effect, and we don't have unions. This board has always been of the opinion that we're going to be at CPI or close. You don't have to make the decision. I'm just telling what's been done in the past. So with that, for the new board members, the process is this budget essentially goes into a holding pattern. Will be 3 or 4 small tweaks now of the museum, with the standalone for the sheriff. We have a Chapter 982 expense we need to cover in Health and Human Services. We know we're going to have some uncollectible tax deed expenses. Those are the 4 things I'm telling the board. Those are the 4 things I know of today. Those are going to be less than 125,000 probably total. Is that a pretty hard number, Jody? Yep. So I know there'll be some small tweaks. Jim.
With what's going on in the world and stuff like that, they're on that $200,000 contingency fund there. Do you think that should be increased, or are you comfortable with that?
Typically, the true contingency is about 100,000. Having this extra 100,000, that is a cushion for if there would be some extra COVID expenses, things like that. And then we also have that excess fund balance
That was
too.
my thought.
So, between the 2 of them, I'm feeling comfortable. I'm thinking that with these changes that are gonna come, that Jeff just mentioned, we probably are gonna have to cut back that 200,000 contingency amount to cover those other things. Otherwise, we're gonna have to use fund balance for it, or something's gonna have to get tweaked. Let's put it that way, so.
And I want to be careful, because with us looking at this financing, and I know I'm probably overly cautious all the time, but us financing the potential highway shop, I want to be very circumspect with how we get from now to the passage of the budget. And I'm not opposed to what you're saying. It's caution. I want to make sure we don't muck up that possibility of financing the highway shop.
Right.
So the process then is, these 4 changes will be presented to executive. I'm not going to be recommending any changes other than these that are here. Executive at the October, their meeting will recommend a published budget. That'll go into a holding pattern. Then we have the public hearing. And if the board wants to make changes after the public hearing, you can make changes or reconvene on the next Tuesday after the public hearing to finalize the budget. But we got to have the budget finalized no later than the 10th or 12th of November to get out the apportionment sheet. So I really don't have a lot more, Louis, other than my updates. Can I just go into those? I'll start shutting stuff off so you can close the meeting. Give me a second. So just for updates, you have available, the executive committee did allow veterans aging ADRC the flexibility to go with to not do walk-ins or in person, but to do things via Skype or Zoom through the end of the year. As you know, the president issued an executive order where people could do a payroll tax deferral. Executive committee said we're not going to do that. To date, we have not had a single employee ask us to do that. I'm glad we're not doing this. There is so much uncertainty, and all the legal people are saying stay away from it, and I'm glad we can. West Central Regional Planning did not make a presentation. They sent everything out. I have extra copies if you'd like to see it. You're on their board. I think they're doing a good job.
There's 9 regional planning boards in the state, and I believe we have the best one. Gary and Stan are also commissioners on there along with me, and then Terry Lee's on the Regional Business Fund. They're a great organization. They really help our county.
And I only have one appointment, Mr. Chairman, and that's Mr. Sampson, has been interviewed by myself and Health and Human Services Director Frolick. He is willing to replace Dr. Ruminovich. I would recommend him. I think he's going to be a great addition. Need a motion to approve that appointment.
Motion by Supervisor Olson, second by Supervisor Hanson to approve that appointment. Is there any discussion? Not all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign. That motion's carried. 14, claims, petitions, and correspondence. We have 15, suggestions for a future agenda.
I'm going to have a presentation by Health Boy electronically, and then I've asked Student Folgery to be here to talk to you about the renewal and PPA and all that health insurance stuff.
And we may have something depending on what property and exec does on snowmobile loans that right now are deferred to next year. Next meeting date will be October 19th at 7 p.m. Anything else? We'll adjourn by unanimous consent at 8:24. Thank you, everybody.